Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Melissa, we're working on recognition as a leadership team at work this week.
Oh,
so like cool. The idea, Chris, one of our leaders, wanted to make sure that people were being recognized for their work, which is great. This is a great initiative. Mm-hmm. One thing I'll admit that I'm bad at is recognizing other people because for me, I'm not super motivated by that. And I think in previous pods, we've actually talked about how it kind of freaks me out.
Yeah.
So I don't do that for other people. Naturally, I have to be really purposeful about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like last week when you, my friend, reminded me that I should tell one of my employees how great of a job she'd been doing after I was droning on and on about it to you, but I had not told her.
Exactly. Not a word. Don't tell her.
All you said was, should you tell her that? Or did you tell her that? I was like, oh, no. Yeah, right. I should probably do that.
Wait. Yeah, but then what happened? Because then I said, well, you could call her. And you said, I think I'll write an email.
Send an email. So it got me thinking. It really got me thinking about this idea that what we think of someone else, do they know what we think of them?
Oh,
right.
I'm so excited to talk about this. I have a lot of ideas.
Because I'm walking around, right? And I have all sorts of thoughts about all of these people in my life, right? Mm-hmm. But if I don't express that very much, then they probably don't know how much I, appreciate and love all of them, right? Yeah. They might be thinking the opposite. He never says anything good about me, so whatever. It was just the opposite is true.
Yeah.
So I thought that there's a really interesting gap right there. And I bet it causes all sorts of problems.
All sorts of ruckus. And I think it's slightly exacerbated by your personality style. Right? Because
mine in particular? No. Thank you.
Well, I just
that was direct.
Let's talk about how you went right to it being about you. No, I mean, depending on our personality styles, we have a tendency to think about rewarding other people or treating other people the way we want to be treated. And we oftentimes assume everybody feels the same way. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, I'm more of an extrovert. So I have a tendency to be more expressive about how I feel about other people. Mm-hmm. And so until, a few years back, I would treat everybody in that same way. It's I'd rather people tell me right on how they think or feel about me. Mm. And so I would naturally do that with other people. But if you're an introvert, you really don't want people to come right at you and tell you what they think. You'd rather have the dialogue in your own mind and make up that story, right? About how the other person must be thinking or feeling rather than having it come right at you, because that's really overwhelming.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is if I'm trying to figure out what someone else thinks of me.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
I project my own self-image.
Yes, precisely.
Right? So if I, am not thinking highly of myself, I'm going to think other people don't think highly of me. But that could be completely false.
Yeah. Yeah. You just summarized that. Once again, you did a really good job of word compacting what I was wandering around trying to get at. Yeah. It's true though. And I think a lot of times we make up stories about what other people think about us. Mm-hmm. And they're not right.
Yeah, this is we've talked about it. This is fun because this dovetails into all sorts of things.
I know it does.
Our 5 love languages episode, right?
I know.
So it's the words of affirmation is one of those.
Yep.
5 love languages, right?
Yeah.
So people who's like that's their love language, they would actually more naturally give affirming words to other people. And what was the other episode it dovetailed in with? Oh, I'll think about it in a second.
Yeah, but I think this has a lot to do with, it has a lot to do with our own self-awareness. It has to do with our self-esteem. It has to do with how we see the world and our ability to be objective, right? Because how many times have people misunderstood what you thought of them in your brief recollection? Like if you were to just think about it.
I think pretty often.
Do you?
I think so. Like, I think I get the sense that people think I expect a lot more out of them than I actually do.
Oh.
And that's not saying I have like low expectations for
I know
work performance or anything, but I think they often think they're not doing enough.
Oh.
But I always think they're doing way more than enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's
but again, that's probably like my low expressiveness. I'm not like telling them like, hey, you're doing like way above and beyond what I expect.
Yeah. That's so really
by not saying anything, it creates a gap.
Well,
where they're constantly trying to do more.
And I mean, this is particularly prevalent in relationships where you have a lot of influence over someone, right? Like if you're peer to peer, maybe you don't. Maybe you still think about it, but in a little bit of a different, you don't give it as much energy or you don't give it as much attention.
Yeah.
But if it's like if you're in a role of highly influencing someone else, like a boss or somebody, a mentor, or you have just a little more experience in something than someone else and they know it, I think that people tell themselves stories that they're being judged. I think that's just a natural human instinct. To think, oh my gosh, I have to be this certain way. You know, this person must look at me and think I'm not as good as them.
Yeah. I was even thinking about, like this idea is all over work scenarios, right? But it happens in your personal life too. Like just think back to times where like, maybe like my wife thought that I wanted the house to be a certain cleanliness. So she tried to live up to a thing, like keep everything sort of like,
pristine.
Especially when we had like young kids, the house was always just chaos, right?
Yeah.
But like, she'd like try to keep it to a standard, which like, I really didn't care about. Like, of course the house is a disaster. We have kids. It doesn't bother me at all. But she'd always like, think that I wanted it cleaner than I actually did. So it would cause her stress.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that for a long time.
So why do you think she did? Like, think about that for a second, because that's interesting. Why do people make assumptions about us and then act on them? Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. Part of it, there's probably a lot of layers here, because in that house scenario, I think it's probably like, there's maybe like a, I don't know, social or stereotypical sort of view of like how, I don't know, clean your house should be, or like even, this probably gets even deeper, like the role of a stay-at-home mom or something. And like what sort of like these images pressures or stereotypes. And so that might play into it.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think actually also plays into it in our personal scenario here is like, especially when the kids were young, like it would just like get overwhelming. And then I would spend like an entire Saturday, like a crazy person cleaning the house.
I did too.
So I think what that probably signaled was like, hey, JJ wants the house way cleaner. What I was actually trying to do was just get the house back to like a baseline level of sanity.
So that you could live in it for a while longer without worrying about it.
Yeah. Right. But it wasn't like me trying to, I was actually like trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
But what it was probably signaling was like, this isn't good enough.
Yeah. So what you're saying, what I just heard you say is your energy was kicking off a message
Mm-hmm.
So what you were doing, your energy was kicking off a message that was being read, but it wasn't being read quite accurately.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an important thing to think about, because the energy that we kick off, and I'm always talking about energy, the energy we kick off is what people are reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not what we're saying. So if we are kicking off an energy of quiet resolution, like, I'm just going to clean this house all day, I'm going to take it on myself, I'm not going to ask the other person because I know that they're tired, they need a break, da 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 da. But that person is just reading the energy of you scooting around, cleaning everything. By the way, this is so me. I think much of it is stemming not from what our expectations of other people are. Rather, it's our expectations for ourselves and wanting to participate with other people. But other people are doing the same thing. So I think that they feel that they're judging themselves, so everyone else must be too.
Yeah. Think about just like the sort of like global amount of unnecessary anxiety because of this gap.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, I mean, you can see this like sort of communication expectation gap all over the place, and how much consternation it causes for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really an interesting thing. And you know what I immediately went to thinking about right here? I started thinking about, how can we help? How can we help? And maybe what that means is, how can we be so aware of the energy that we're kicking off that it leaves very little doubt for others, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because we don't have any control over other people.
Yep.
You know, even if we tell them, even if we try to even be the most accurate, specific communicator, we cannot control how they hear it.
Yep.
All we can control is what we kick off. And I mean, I think this is just such a good reminder about, right? Like, how are we responsible for this?
How many, maybe this doesn't happen to you, but this happens to me, where I will say a thing, a very specific thing. Like, I don't like this expectation is okay. And then someone will come back later and say like, yeah, I know you said that, but I didn't really feel that was going to be okay.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I said something specific, but they came back and said, I didn't feel like you meant that. Right? Yeah. So that would be like the energy problem you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where something about the energy I was kicking off was not aligned with what I was actually saying.
Right. I've had that same thing happen. As a matter of fact, this week, I was in a coaching session with someone I just adore, super fun client, very intelligent, good sense of humor. And I asked him a question, and it was an open-ended question, but I was leading to something because I was excited. Like, we were on the verge of something, right? And I could just tell he was ready for that. And so I wanted to enter into the conversation more gradually. So I didn't really have an agenda other than getting into the topic. So I didn't have an agenda about how the topic went, right? I didn't have an opinion about how he was. I was really excited about talking about that subject. And so I asked a general question, and the energy that I asked that with, he picked up on right away. And he said, my spidey sense tells me that you might know something I don't. And I was so taken aback by that. I was like, oh, no, not at all. Like, I'm just excited to talk about this topic. But that enthusiasm or that energy that I was kicking out, getting ready for the conversation, like getting ready to be ready, he was misunderstanding as I was coming for him in some way. Not quite that hard, but.
Well, that's an interesting story. The thing that struck me the most was that he had the awareness and to kind of call you on it.
Yep. Yes.
To say, because if he didn't, he would have thought you had like some sort of other agenda.
Mm-hmm.
The entire conversation, it would have wrecked the whole conversation, because he would have been like constantly thinking, oh, Melissa's got some alternative motive here, some other agenda, some other information that, you know, and it would have turned into like probably a way worse interaction.
Well, maybe, or it just could have been a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think, because you know what? We all do that. We all reach for the other person in any conversation. We're reaching for, what does that other person need? What does that other person expect? What is happening right now? What am I trying to get done right now? Like, we all are in our heads all the time. And I don't think we notice it. And in this situation, I was grateful because particularly with him, that's been something that he has high anxiety. Well, high anxiety is based off of us trying to get out ahead of absolutely everything before it happens. Anxiety, we always talk about that. It's spending too much time focusing on the future, which means that we aren't present when we're listening and talking with other people. So if we're talking with someone who's more introverted, like you, for example, and so if you and I are in conversation and you are more careful with your words, you choose your words more specifically. If I was really worrying about the outcome of the conversation, I'd have a hard time listening to the words that you chose, even if there were only 10 of them. Because I'd be so busy looking at you like, oh, are you okay with what we're saying? Like, is this okay? And I think that's a really important thing to pay attention to, is our own reactions and responses while we're having conversations with other people, because we're making these giant leaps in opinions about what the other person thinks all the time. And then we're reacting to that.
Yeah. Like you're reacting to like your own thoughts.
Yes,
about it,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Being a human is ironic. It's like, right? Your brain is like in a constant state of like irony against itself or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reflecting on that. Actually, yesterday I was reflecting on that, like how engaged our brain is constantly telling us stories. And I started with 2 new clients this week. So it was a very busy week. And I have a number of clients that I've been in partnership with now for several months. And the different kinds of conversations are just so textbook at those different points in the relationship. And how when people first come to me, how stuck in their heads they are. And how it's so hard to see because it's painful.
Yeah.
It is painful.
So this week, another thing I was dealing with was we had 2 individuals that were just having kind of like a communication problem around a project, right? And one of the people is like an idea guy, right? Always has ideas.
Yeah.
Always spitting out ideas. Like, you know, these people, right? It's just like a constant spray of ideas. And to them, that's like part of their persona and part of their value. Like they think the idea generation is valuable, right?
Yeah.
To some people on the other side of that fire hose, it's like, oh my God, stop trying to change our project. No, we can't do this or that.
Right.
It's like feels like constant breaks, and it's exhausting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so as we're talking about how like ideas, I love ideas, like, right? Like I'm an idea guy too.
Yeah.
But the way we start spitting those ideas out is important. Right. So I was kind of just doing some coaching on like, hey, how do we bring ideas to the table and when's it appropriate and blah, blah, blah. And we started, and you and I talk about this, like we start using words like, hey, I wonder if.
Right.
Right. And so,
yeah.
But it struck me as you were talking about like our brain and it's filling in these stories and it generating these ideas. It's like, that's what your brain does, right? It creates ideas, and like so many of them are not good or just throwaway or just, but it's part of its value is to generate ideas. So you kind of have to objectively think like, are these ideas and stories that are being generated now good or bad? If they're not good, then throw them away. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. And yes. And the brain's job, its function is to come from a place of experience. Mm-hmm. It's creating from a place of past experiences. So it's limited.
Yeah.
It's limited.
So like this whole thing where we've got like, miscommunications happening between people and people not understanding what other people think, and your brain trying to fill in all of these gaps with stories that it just makes up, like ideas it just creates to see if it might fit or not, right? It's just like
noise.
Chaos.
It's just noise. It's just noise. And then we get tired. I think we get tired. We create noise. We all create noise. I think we get so exhausted from the noise that eventually we just stop, or we hit a wall, or we hit a breaking point, or we feel depressed, or we get quiet. And it's usually in those quiet times where we start then judging ourselves. But what we seem to do is push it out to other people's opinion. Again, like, which brings us back to what you started the conversation with. It's like we start telling ourselves stories that this other person must see me like this. Mm-hmm. I'm feeling so like this. Everyone else must see me as such a fill in the blank.
Yeah, right.
And then those other people had nothing to do with it.
Yep. Okay, so I want to ask you, we talked about energy and how like you have to get your words and your energy to align for people to actually get it. Yeah. How do you get into a conversation where you're like posturing the right energy or you're putting out the right energy? Like, what tips do you have around that?
Well, and I'd like to hear your ideas and what you think too. For me, I think the number one thing, and I always have the same answer for almost every question as it relates to this, it's how do you really feel? And so often when we don't feel good in a conversation, in a partnership, at work, whatever, these moments where we don't feel good is when we start amping up our stories. So, and then we kick off a certain energy. That's the natural way. We have a feeling, we think about that feeling, and it creates an action. We have a feeling, we think about that feeling, and it creates the action. So what I would suggest is check in with what is that feeling like. I'm in this brainstorm session and I haven't said anything for 10 minutes. Am I being judged for not being creative? Okay. As soon as you hear those questions and as soon as you feel a judgment, as soon as you feel heavy inside, ask yourself, wait a minute, what's behind this? What am I thinking about that's making me feel bad, that's then causing me to act in a way that doesn't really honor or suit me? I think it's just checking in with our feelings first. And sometimes, you know what, we just don't feel like we're in a good spot. Sometimes we've had a bad night, or we haven't slept well, or our kids are having problems, or, there's all sorts of reasons that we don't feel our best selves. But recognizing that we often then will jump to putting it on someone else's shoulders, because it feels easier to blame someone else than to say, oh, I'm doing this. Like, it's way easier to say, oh, Chris was just doing this, or, Tom was he was in such a bad spot. It was just hard to deal with him. I mean, the reality is it's more gentle and easier to pass through if you just say, that was me, actually. I just not feeling very good, and it's okay. I'm not going to be mean to myself about it, and I'm not going to push my story on other people about it. I'm just going to say I don't feel good today. It's just like being more present in how we feel. Yeah. And oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just thinking back to like my crazy cleaning persona and like I was like, oh yeah, it was actually trying to be helpful, but I was also probably a little irritated that the house got so messy and that I had to spend an entire Saturday dealing with it.
Right. So we do that though. We kind of collect stamps, and then that last stamp fills the book, right? And then we cash the book in. So for you that Saturday morning, the last stamp got filled because you probably stepped on a Lego. Yep. And that was it. You were all in. You were going to clean the dang house, and you were going to prove to everyone, not just you, that this is what the house can look like. Yeah, but that's normal because I think that's what we do is we feel kind of yucky and we don't want to acknowledge that to ourselves. Nope.
But right. So like, is it possible, like, would it be possible for me to like kind of get the point across? Like I really want to clean the house. It makes me feel better. I am irritated that the house is this messy. This is not a judgment on
anything else.
Anyone else. It's not a judgment on the kids or my wife or anyone. It's just like a thing I need to do for myself. Although that still leaves it feels like that's would still leave a gap.
Well, I think that...
But maybe it's a place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. Because honestly, I think that the most important thing is that we are honest with ourselves and we get used to being able to honor ourselves through saying and being and doing our authenticity. So like for me, for example, like the thing that I also value a clean house. But the thing that I really value is that the people that are close to me know exactly how I feel about them. Not in a flowery way, but I want them to know that I love them. And so I made a decision that even if it was awkward, I was going to let people know that that's how I felt. And so with all of my friends, and I've told you I love you, like I've told my friends that I love them. And, people don't know how to respond to real deep truths because it's like, weird. But for me, it's not. To me, it's just like, I want to honor how I feel and I want to know that people deeply know that I care for them. And so I might not always have the best action and I may beat myself up sometime and I may not be my best self, but I am going to push as much as I can in my awareness when I can. I'm going to just honor how I am. And it feels really good to do that.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to be.
Yeah. And I'm not there all the time, but I sure enjoy practicing. And I think we can all do that. We can all choose just to practice something that is really authentic for us and say it in a way that we speak from our language. It's like, I'm doing this so that I am taking care of letting people know how I feel. I'm not doing this because I have expectations of other people to me or that anyone has to respond to me in a certain way or that I expect things back. It's just simply, I'm doing this because I'm honoring me. And please don't take that personally or don't take that in the wrong way. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.